Most people don't realize that the way they think today is a perfect reflection of how they thought yesterday, and the way they'll think tomorrow is just a repeat of the same cycle. We wake up, check our phones, worry about the same problems, complain about the same things, and replay the same conversations in our heads. And what we don't recognize is that every single one of those repetitive thoughts is literally wiring the brain to stay the same. It's not that life isn't changing, it's that our mind isn't giving it permission to change. Think about it for a moment. Every habit you have, whether it's the habit of doubting yourself, procrastinating, overthinking, or living in fear, started as just a single thought. That thought, repeated enough times, became a belief. That belief began to shape how you felt, and those feelings kept reinforcing the original thought. Before long, it wasn't just a thought anymore. It became your personality, your identity. You started to say things like, "This is just the way I am. I'm not disciplined. I always procrastinate. I'm not confident." But in reality, those aren't facts. They're simply programs you've been running over and over until they became automatic. The science is clear. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Every time you think a thought, your brain strengthens the connections associated with that thought. If you think about your failures every morning, you're literally making failure your default state of mind. If you constantly imagine rejection, you are rehearsing rejection before it even happens. And this is why people feel trapped, why they keep living the same life, even when they desperately want change. They're not victims of circumstance, they're victims of repetition. The first step to reprogramming your brain in 7 days is awareness. You have to become conscious of the unconscious. You must catch yourself in the act of being yourself. This means noticing when that old thought comes up, pausing long enough to realize, wait, this is just the program running again. At that moment, you have the power to choose differently. It may sound small, but that one moment of awareness interrupts the cycle. It creates space, and in that space, transformation can begin. You might say, but it feels impossible to stop my thoughts. They come automatically. And that's true. But just because something is automatic doesn't mean it's permanent. Think about driving a car. At first, it was difficult. You had to consciously think about every move, but eventually it became automatic. The same is true for your mental habits. They only feel natural because you've practiced them for years. And if you practice them into existence, you can practice them out of existence. So what does it mean to break the old patterns? It means no longer giving your mind permission to live in the past. The moment you recognize that you are recycling yesterday's thoughts, you must remind yourself, the past is not my future unless I choose to drag it there. If you want a new reality, you have to stop repeating the old one. That begins with refusing to indulge the familiar story of who you think you are. It's uncomfortable at first. The brain craves the familiar. The body craves the familiar emotions, even if they're negative. Worry, doubt, anger, sadness, these feelings become addictive because they're predictable. And when you start breaking the cycle, your body resists. It wants to pull you back into the old state. That's why most people quit. They think the resistance means it isn't working. But the resistance is proof that it is working. You're literally rewiring your brain. I want you to imagine this. Every time you catch an old thought and refuse to follow it, you're weakening a neural connection. Every time you choose not to replay that old story, you're cutting off energy from the program that used to run your life. Slowly, that program dies, and in its place, new connections begin to form. This is the science of neuroplasticity. Your brain is designed to change. It is built to adapt. You are not fixed. You are fluid. So as you step into this process, the first assignment is simple but profound. Spend 1 day observing your thoughts. Don't try to change them. Just notice them. How many times do you think about your limitations? How many times do you imagine failure before you even begin? How many times do you let the past dictate your future? Once you see it clearly, you can no longer pretend it's invisible. and awareness is the beginning of freedom. The truth is, you cannot step into a new life with the same old mind. If you want transformation, the first step is to break the cycle of repetition, interrupt the pattern, refuse to recycle yesterday into today, refuse to let the program run your life. That's where true change begins. Twice. And if you can do that, even for a few minutes a day, you've already taken the first step in reprogramming your brain. You've already begun the 7-day journey. So remember this. Every time you notice an old thought and refuse to follow it, you've already won, because in that moment, you are no longer the prisoner of your past. You are the architect of your future. Once you begin to break the old patterns, the next question becomes, what do you replace them with? Because the mind doesn't just delete, it rewires. If you remove the old programs but never install new ones, you'll fall back into the same cycle. This is why so many people try to change but end up repeating the past. They focus on what they want to stop but never decide on what they want to start. Reprogramming the brain is not about simply resisting the old self. It's about deliberately creating the new self. And the fastest way to do this is through repetition of new, empowering thoughts combined with consistent actions that support those thoughts. Think of it like learning a new language. At first, it feels foreign and awkward. You might stutter or forget the words, but with daily practice, those words begin to flow. Eventually, you stop translating and you just start speaking. The same principle applies to your mind. You're teaching it a new language, the language of possibility, of confidence, of discipline, of self-belief. Science shows us that when you imagine something vividly enough, your brain doesn't know the difference between the thought and the actual experience. Athletes use this all the time. A basketball player rehearses the perfect free throw in his mind. A runner visualizes crossing the finish line. Their bodies respond as though it has already happened. Why? Because the brain is simply responding to the signals it receives, and imagination is a powerful signal. This is why visualization is not wishful thinking, it's neurological rehearsal. You're literally firing and wiring new pathways that prepare your body and mind for a future experience. So the process of installing new programs begins with clarity. Who do you want to become? Don't just say successful or happy. That's too vague. Get specific. What does your future self think about when they wake up? How do they walk, talk, and carry themselves? What decisions do they make when faced with challenges? The clearer the picture, the stronger the signal to your brain. Without clarity, the brain defaults back to old wiring. With clarity, it starts building a blueprint for the new you. Right? But clarity alone is not enough. The program must be reinforced through practice. Every day, you must rehearse being that person. You rehearse it through your thoughts. You rehearse it through your emotions. You rehearse it through your actions. If you want to be disciplined, don't wait until you feel like it. Act disciplined today. If you want confidence, don't wait for the world to give you reasons to feel confident. Embody it now. When you do this, your brain starts to align with your future instead of your past. Many people resist this idea because they think it feels fake. But the truth is, you've already been living a fake program for years. The program of doubt, fear, procrastination. None of that was your authentic self. It was just a repeated pattern. So when you step into a new identity, you're not pretending, you're reclaiming your power. You're saying, this is who I choose to be. And your brain responds by creating the pathways that support that choice. Here's something remarkable. Research in neuroscience shows that it doesn't take years for new wiring to begin. It can happen in days. Just a few days of consistent practice can begin altering the structure of your brain. That means in a single week with deliberate focus, you can start to feel and act like a different person. Imagine that 7 days of new thoughts, 7 days of new emotions, 7 days of new actions. That's enough to begin shifting your identity at the deepest level. The key is consistency. Just like lifting a weight once doesn't build muscle, thinking a new thought once won't change your life. But repeat it daily with emotion and intention, and the brain has no choice but to adapt. This is why affirmations work, not because of the words themselves, but because of the emotional energy behind them. If you speak an affirmation with no feeling, the brain ignores it. But if you say it with conviction, if you visualize it, if you feel it in your body as though it's already true, your brain begins to wire it as reality. So in this 7-day journey, your second assignment is simple. Every day, spend time rehearsing your future self. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and see yourself already living the life you desire. Don't just see it. Feel the gratitude, the joy, the confidence, as if it's happening right now. Then, when you open your eyes, carry that feeling into your actions. Live the rehearsal. Walk like the person you envisioned, speak like them, make decisions like them. Because the more you practice, the more automatic it becomes. And remember, your brain is always listening. Every thought, every emotion, every action is sending instructions to your nervous system, telling it who you are. So if you want to reprogram your brain in 7 days, stop sending it the instructions of the past and start sending it the instructions of your future. The truth is this: you don't have to wait for success to arrive in order to feel successful. You don't have to wait for freedom to feel free. You don't have to wait for abundance to feel abundant. If you can generate the feeling now, your brain will begin to create the pathways that make it real. So don't just break the old patterns, install the new ones. Don't just stop being who you were. Start rehearsing who you choose to be. Because the brain doesn't care whether it's real or imagined. It only cares about what you repeat. And if you repeat the future with enough intention, the future becomes your present. Up until now, we've spoken about breaking the old patterns and installing new ones. But there is a final crucial step that ties it all together. You must begin to live as your future self right now. Not tomorrow, not a week from now, not when conditions are perfect, but today, because transformation doesn't happen in the future. Transformation happens in the present moment. Yep. The mistake most people make is believing that they must wait for something external to change before they can change internally. They say, when I get the promotion, then I'll feel confident. When I lose the weight, then I'll feel proud. When I succeed, then I'll feel worthy. But that is the old model of reality. It is cause and effect. It is waiting for the world to give you permission to feel the way you want to feel. And as long as you live that way, you are trapped by circumstances. The new model, the one supported by neuroscience and ancient philosophy alike, is to reverse the process. Don't wait for the success to feel confident. Feel confident now, and success will come. Don't wait for freedom to arrive to feel free. Feel freedom now, and your life will start to align with that vibration. Your thoughts and emotions are not simply responses to reality. They are creators of reality. The moment you generate the feeling of your future in the present, you're collapsing the distance between where you are and where you want to be. Living as your future self means you stop identifying with the version of you that's waiting. You stop saying, someday I will be. Instead, you declare, I am becoming now. Every time you think, every time you feel, every time you act, you are either reinforcing your past identity or embodying your future. 1. There is no neutral ground. You are always rehearsing something. The question is, what are you rehearsing? And let's make this practical. If your future self is disciplined, how would they act today? Would they hit the snooze button 3 times, or would they rise with purpose? If your future self is abundant, how would they think about money today? Would they dwell in scarcity and fear, or would they think with generosity and creativity? If your future self is confident, how would they carry themselves in a conversation today? Would they shrink back, or would they speak with clarity and conviction? The key is not perfection. It's alignment. Every small choice is an opportunity to align with the version of you that you are creating. The more you align, the faster the gap closes, and eventually there is no gap at all. You wake up one morning and realize you are already living the life you once imagined. Now, of course, the body and mind will resist. Remember, your old self is familiar, and the familiar feels safe. That's why the mind will whisper doubts. This isn't really you. You're pretending you're not ready yet. But understand, that voice is the past trying to pull you back. And the way you silence it is not through argument, but through action. Every time you act as your future self, the voice of the past grows weaker. Every time you embody the new identity, the old identity loses its grip. Now, this is not about faking it until you make it. It's about being it until you become it. There's a profound difference. Faking implies pretense, a mask that hides insecurity. Being implies truth, a conscious decision to align with the reality you're choosing. When you decide to live as your future self now, you are not pretending, you are practicing. And practice makes permanence. Say, philosophers have long told us that the highest form of wisdom is to live as if the desired future were already present. Modern science now confirms this. When you think and feel in alignment with your vision, you send signals to your brain and body that it's already happening. Your nervous system begins to reorganize, your hormones begin to shift, your perception of opportunities changes. People, ideas, and circumstances begin to show up in ways that match your state of being. This isn't magic. This is coherence, the natural alignment between your inner world and your outer world. Now, so here's the final assignment in this 7-day journey. Each day, ask yourself, if I were already the person I want to become, how would I think right now? How would I feel? How would I act? And then do it even in small ways, especially in small ways, because every choice is a signal to your brain, a piece of evidence that reinforces the new identity. When you live this way, something extraordinary happens. The future stops being a distant goal and starts becoming a lived reality. You no longer chase change, you embody change. And once you embody it, life has no choice but to reflect it back to you. Okay? So remember this. You don't transform by waiting. You don't transform by hoping. You transform by living as though it's already true. And the moment you live as your future self now, your brain, your body, and your life begin to follow. That is the true power of reprogramming your mind. It doesn't just change what you think, it changes who you are. We've talked about breaking the old patterns, installing new ones, and embodying your future self in the present moment. But there's one more layer to this process, and it's what ensures that transformation doesn't fade after a week or two. That layer is integration, because real change is not a temporary state. It's a way of life. It's easy to get inspired for a few days. It's easy to feel motivated when everything is fresh and exciting. But true transformation means living in alignment with your new self long enough that it becomes your default. And integration is the practice of weaving your new identity into the fabric of your everyday life until it is no longer what you're striving for. It's simply who you are. Here's the challenge most people face. They treat change like a project instead of a lifestyle. They dedicate a week or maybe a month and then slowly drift back to their old ways once life gets busy. That's because the old patterns are always waiting. They don't disappear overnight. They're etched into the nervous system, waiting for you to give them attention again. That's why integration requires awareness, commitment, and patience, not in a rigid or exhausting way, but in a conscious and deliberate way. Think of it like planting a seed. In the first week, the seed sprouts. That's the breakthrough moment, when you first feel the shift, when you sense that something new is possible. But a sprout is fragile. If you don't water it, nurture it, and protect it, it withers away. The same is true with your new identity. Those first 7 days are powerful because they show you that change is real. But if you want that change to become who you are, you must keep tending to it. You must water it daily with thoughts, emotions, and actions that reinforce it. This doesn't mean perfection. Integration is not about never falling back into old habits. It's about recognizing when you do and quickly realigning. It's about having the awareness to catch yourself drifting and the discipline to bring yourself back. Every time you realign, you're strengthening the new program. You're telling your brain and body, this is who I am now. And here's the beauty of integration. Over time, it gets easier, not harder. At first, living as your future self requires effort. You're constantly reminding yourself, constantly redirecting your focus. But as the new wiring solidifies, it begins to run automatically. What once felt like conscious practice eventually feels natural. Discipline no longer feels forced, it feels normal. Confidence no longer feels like an act, it feels authentic. And when you reach that point, you no longer have to think about being your future self because you are your future self. There's also a deeper truth here. Integration isn't just about personal habits, it's about how you show up in the world. Because once you begin to live from a higher state of being, your energy shifts. People notice it. Situations begin to respond differently. Life starts to reorganize around your new identity. And suddenly, opportunities that once seemed impossible appear within reach. This is what some call synchronicity, but it's really just coherence. The inner world and the outer world have aligned. So, how do you integrate in practical terms? You start small but consistent. You create rituals, daily practices that anchor your new self. Maybe it's a morning visualization where you rehearse the day as your future self. Maybe it's journaling, reflecting on how you lived in alignment today and where you slipped. Maybe it's setting an intention each morning. Today I will act as the person I am becoming. Whatever the method, the goal is the same, to remind yourself every single day of who you are choosing to be. No, and just as importantly, you celebrate the progress. Integration is not about perfection, it's about momentum. If you lived even 1 hour today as your future self, that's a victory. If you caught yourself mid thought and chose differently, that's a victory. If you made one decision aligned with your vision, that's a victory. And every victory, no matter how small, is evidence that the transformation is real. What you'll find is this: over time, the line between practice and reality disappears. At first, you're practicing new thoughts, new emotions, new actions. But eventually, they stop feeling like practice and start feeling like you. That's integration. That's when the brain has fully accepted the new wiring and the body has accepted the new emotions. That's when your future self is no longer a vision. It's your identity. And so the fourth step in this journey is to make your transformation your lifestyle. Not a project, not a temporary burst of motivation, but a way of being. Because when you integrate your new self into the flow of daily life, the change becomes unshakable. So let me leave you with this. Transformation doesn't last because you hope it will. Transformation lasts because you decide every single day to live as the person you've chosen to become. And if you hold that decision long enough, consistently enough, there comes a day when you don't have to remind yourself anymore because the new self has become your only self